Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom Orr. And Tom, this is a live show?
Every show you say coming to you live from the Linebackers Athletic Center. This time we actually mean it. We actually are live, unless you're listening later, in which case we're not.
You could have listened to this live, I think, since it's our first time trying it, although we did do it one other time, maybe for like a pregame Nebraska thing as a test. We did not follow up on that test, but it did work. But this is like another new test because we have not followed up. But this is also just banter in order to allow people to come to the show if it in fact did get tweeted out.
It did get tweeted out, so that's something.
Hey, there you go. All right, well, let's start the show then. I'm tired of waiting for people. Today, Wednesday? Today is Wednesday.
Yes.
Talk to the linebackers, the running backs, and the tight ends, and their associated position coaches. This is our first time talking to Al Washington since the spring.
Yes.
First time talking to Tony Alford in a while, Kevin Wilson in a while. We did not talk to JK because we've already talked to him 2 or 3 times this summer. If I were to, go through and what one thing did I learn today over anything else, it would probably be just a continuation of what Ryan Day said earlier this week, and that is DeMario McCall is the backup running back. And we were talking about the need for that number 2 guy. DeMario had a little bit of an edge, and Tony Alford said if there was a game today, it would be DeMario. And why? It's because he's stronger, he's bigger, he's healthy, and he's good at running the ball. And you talked to him a little bit about some of the stuff that he had to do in order to get that nod.
Yeah, DeMario said the biggest thing for him was blocking. And just, I mean, we've talked about this in the context of the wide receivers. We've talked about this in the context of the tight ends, and it's true of the running backs as well. Being able to, carry the ball, take care of the ball when you're running it, that's all great. That's all very important. If you can't block, if you can't pick up a blitz, you can't play, because they have to have you on the field and have you be able to do that at all times, because otherwise teams can just go, oh, hey, it's that guy that can't pick up a blitz, and then they just blitz you, and then your quarterback gets hurt, and then your season is over. So DeMario said that was the biggest thing for him. He said that was the biggest thing that was kind of the thing that the younger guys were working on as well, that they had to kind of get nailed down before they were really ready to kind of take that backup job as well. And I asked him, so what is it about that blitz pickup that's hard? Is it the mental aspect of it, where it's like, okay, they may be disguising coverages, I don't know where the pressure's really been coming from, or is it the physical, like, hey, that dude's a big defensive end, I'm a running back, I still have to be able to stop him even though he's much bigger than me? And he said for him it's always been on the physical side, where he came in at 180 pounds, and he said, he's going up against defensive ends that are much, 50 pounds bigger than him, 60 pounds bigger than him. He had to put on weight just to be able to do that. He's done that, so now he's in a better position to do it, but that's still, that's still a challenge. You're still significantly undersized compared to the guy that you're trying to get in the way of.
Oh, so DeMario is not now like 5'9", 260?
No, he has not been on the Nicholas Petit Frere diet this year. He still looks like DeMario, just maybe a little bigger, and you know what? And healthy and out on the field.
Yeah,
and that's a big win for Ohio State this year.
Yeah, the whole best ability is availability. JK continues to have nothing but high praise spoken of him. So who cares anymore? Tony Alford didn't want to put a number on what a successful season for him would be. But I think we know it's 1,600 yards.
And 16 touchdowns, I believe.
I'm just going to keep lowering my 1,700 from yesterday. Marcus Crowley, I think Alfred said he, maybe not the most explosive guy, but just continues to runs hard, does what you ask, does well, and Master Teague right now just hasn't had the health that they need, but he has confidence in all of these guys, which he said before. But to me, this might be his deepest group once they're all healthy, because rarely have they been able to go even 3 deep, and oftentimes they can't even really go 2 deep. When you're talking about when Mike Weber was hurt in 2017 and it was just J.K. and Antonio Williams, which meant it was really just J.K. And now you've got where they are confident in going to DeMario, no problem, at 2, and then 3, 4, and we'll see how many of those guys will play. Anything else from the running backs? There's really...
You asked
oh, yes, that's true.
You asked about the fastest running back, and that's not necessarily the answer I would have
So I
expected.
did ask Tony Alford at the end who he thinks is the... I asked him who is the fastest running back, and he said Master Teague. And then I said, do you think DeMario and J.K. would agree with that? To which he said, probably not, but you asked me. Meaning I asked him, and so he gave me his answer. And this is Master Teague getting those 4.3s at Alabama camp and the Ohio State camp summer before his senior year. So we know he's fast. When they run 4.3s, that's all hand timed, mumbo jumbo. But for the coach to say that this is the fastest guy, and he also happens to be the second biggest guy behind Steel Chambers, and he's the heaviest running back.
Yeah, he's listed as the heaviest.
So if you can get that guy healthy, he's got a good skill set, picking up the blocks. He's still learning all of that. But once you get your biggest, fastest running back healthy, you'd think that's a guy you could use.
Yeah, big, fast running backs who can run through tackles. That seems like a useful thing for a football team to have. And he's someone who, from when he was in high school, you heard people talking like, yeah, this guy's going to be good. He was. Ohio State's had a couple guys in the last couple of years that have been running backs, Crowley and Teague both, who you have looked at their highlights. You've listened to people talk, and it's like, I don't think the ratings match the player. Crowley was a 3-star, but he was the high school player of the year in the state of Florida, which is a state that produces, some high school football players of some note.
Chris Olave last year,
yeah. But just from that running back room, Teague and Crowley have kind of jumped out to me as people who probably are not getting the hype that their future production probably deserves.
The reason for that is probably because we're using all of our hype on Josh Proctor.
Well, that's true, and that's fine. And I think that what we've heard from coaches and players all week and all month basically has indicated we're not pulling that out of thin air. That's
no, and I've not spent this entire show on Josh Proctor again, but I was listening to some of the sound going through the transcription from yesterday, and Sean Wade talked about how he's similar to Malik Hooker, except Tom, he's bigger, maybe he said faster and younger. Just those few things. And then he also said he's got long arms like Jalen Ramsey, and he hits like Jalen Ramsey. So this sophomore safety, who we'll see how much he plays, but is younger, faster, bigger, taller than Malik Hooker, and very much like Jalen Ramsey. So that's not a bad guy to have in your 3 deep, perhaps.
Yeah. He's a combination of all these absolutely incredible football players known for these absolutely off the charts physical abilities and on field production. That's fine. Like that seems like it bodes somewhat well for his future.
We'll see how that goes. As I mentioned, we talked to the linebackers today. I just tweeted out a quote, or actually some video of linebacker coach Al Washington talking about Tough Borland and how a certain segment of the fans have been clamoring for Taraja Mitchell or Baron Browning there, and why is it that Tough Borland keeps winning the job or getting put out there. And you see this kind of reaction of exasperation from Al Washington, who is like, just come watch the film. Basically, come watch the film with me and I'll show you. He gets to the football. He knows where he's going. He gets there. He's tough. He's smart. He's all of that. He's a great leader. It goes back to what Damon Arnett said yesterday. Press the reset button. Don't look back at last year. The Bullets is back, as he said. But how I guess until we see it, until everybody sees it, but the way the coaches and the teammates and to a man, everybody talks about tough. I'm expecting, forget all Big Ten, all American. I'm thinking possible all pro this year.
I mean, possible, sure.
Probable.
I think that you have to weigh how realistic is it that Al Washington is right and people on Twitter are kind of loudmouth jerks who don't know what they're talking about? Like, I don't know. I mean, how likely is that? Based on your experience on Twitter.com,
right.
how likely do you think that is?
Well, as a loudmouth jerk on Twitter, that one hurts, Tom. That really cuts deep. He also spoke very highly of Pete Werner, which you might be surprised to know. Also spoke very highly of Baron Browning, and I asked him about, what is Baron Browning's role, and he said, just be a middle linebacker. They're going to find time for all of these guys, or all of the guys who prove that they can play. He said he's really impressed by how smart Baron Browning is, how well he knows the defense. And when you when we talk about Baron Browning, we always talk about his physical gifts. But what Al Washington wanted to talk about was how smart he is and how just able to diagnose and those things and be the kind of middle linebacker that you would expect. The kind who is, it looks like second nature, but it's because he's processing everything and knows where everything should be and where it's all going. But how much will we see him out there? That's Tom, this whole defense with all of these different pieces and parts. I was thinking about it today. A few years ago, like Motorola had a phone where you could add all of these different modifications. If you wanted to ramp up the camera, there's a modification for that. If you wanted to ramp up the speaker, there's a modification for that. This defense, to me, is just it's 11 guys, but then there are all of these modifications that if you want to accentuate this, we'll put this mod on. This mod is Baron Browning. This mod over here is Josh Proctor. And to me, that's kind of what this defense is. We ask, what is the base defense? And
the base defense is a gator driving 5 feet away from us. That is the base defense on the
it's almost like
every show.
I don't want to say we're stationed in a bad spot, but nearest the entrance of the chairs and everything's probably not great. But this defense, it's just a series of modifications. It's got a base, it's got an undercarriage, and then just all of these different things on it.
And that can include the bullet versus the SAM, as we talked about on the Tuesday show. There's a lot of different ways they can swap these things out. And I did not talk to Al Washington. You did. They brought out 6 different guys at certain points tonight. So while you were talking to Al Washington, I was off talking to Kevin Wilson. So I am not just setting you up with an answer here. This is a legitimate question. They've talked about the Mike and the Will linebacker spots being interchangeable. Are they looking at Browning at one or the other of those positions, or it's just like, he can slide into either of those?
Well, if I remember exactly, and I know they've worked him at will in the spring, but I think he said I don't think he said inside linebacker. I think he said his job is middle linebacker.
Okay.
But I could be wrong about that, because when they say inside linebacker, they're talking about the Mike and the Will, as you know. And yes, he did say that they're all interchangeable. And you could have, like we've said before, you could have Tuff and you could have Barron out there, and you could have Malik Harrison, you could have Barron out there, you could have all of these different options. Kayvon Pope is he's gone back and forth between Sam and Will, and Al was like, he's a linebacker. He can play wherever. And the more and more we talk to the guys, safeties, cornerbacks, the linebackers, they way back in the winter when we were talking about this defense, we were talking about how the many different things they can do, but how is that simpler? How is all of these different things making this defense simpler? And yet, Al Washington said it's not a simple defense, but what they're asking them to do, they're, I guess, more comfortable doing or more able to do, because there is you still have to diagnose, you still have to do this, and you have to do that. I think they have to do fewer of those things.
It seems like they're being asked to do less when the ball is actually in play.
Right.
There was someone Tuesday that talked about this, and I don't remember who it was. It was one of the defensive backs. It might have been Isaiah Pryor. The fact that they can make their defense look complicated without actually being complicated by showing one look before the snap and rotating to something else. So, okay, you show 2 deep safeties, but when the ball's snapped, you're not actually playing it 2 deep. You show one thing, the quarterback checks to something based on that look, and then all of a sudden, once the ball's snapped, he's getting something completely different. So you can make your defense complicated for the opponent without necessarily making all of 11 guys on your team have 3 separate decisions to make in that 4 to 6 seconds. So that seems like that's kind of the overall goal for the defense this year. And so whether it's the looks pre-snap, whether it's the different alignments they have with the Sam versus the bullet, for example, that can give the defense some different looks, and moving Shaun Wade around in different ways like we've talked about. There's a bunch of different stuff that they can do to move things around, give a bunch of different looks without actually making things more difficult for them during that 4 to 6 seconds.
What else with the linebackers? Taraji Mitchell is. I was just getting ready to talk to him, and then Tony Alford had to come out, so I had to run over there. I did ask Tony Alford, what has your assessment been of this defense? And he just said they're fast, and they get to the football, and they know where they're going, and they've gotten faster throughout camp. And when you look at the kind of athletes that this defense has, it's good to have them playing fast again. And when you're talking about a complicated looking defense, I wrote this on the message board today about if you look at what this nickel defense could be, where you've got, say you go with 2 linebackers, and one of those, I think Baron Browning has been in a nickel before as a linebacker, and the other would be, I don't know, either Brendan White or Malik Harrison. You've got Josh Proctor as another safety with Jordan Fuller, playing a 2 deep, and you've got Shaun Wade as the slot corner along with Jeff Okudah and Damon Arnett. And then you add in the Rushman to this, and now you might have the fastest, most athletic defensive lineup in Ohio State football history when you look at every level of athlete that they have on the field when you're throwing Chase Young, Tyreek Smith, and this is even without Jonathan Cooper, who we still have no update on from Ohio State. But if it's just Chase Young, Tyreek Smith, Tyler Friday, and Zach Harrison, or whomever, so many of these crazy gifted athletes running around. And Tom, here's the key: knowing where they're going.
Knowing where they're going, and the fact that they have all of these incredibly talented players that they can put out there and all these different combinations that they can kind of tailor to what the opponent is trying to do or showing, that's all the more reason to keep things simple. Just the hat-on-hat personnel advantage that they have makes them better than virtually everyone they're going to play this year. Now, that the best, most talented team does not always win, but the most talented team wins an awful lot, and the most talented team probably shouldn't give up 49 points too often or 55 points too often. And so if just that alone, they should be better this year. And the fact that they have all this talent and they can deploy it in a way that puts them perhaps in an even better position to succeed because they can tailor it to what they're expecting. I mean, this is the example that we've been using because this is our newest, most exciting example. We finally figured out what the difference between the bullet and the Sam was this week and where they plan to do it. And it was, if the opponent is going to have a fast downfield pass-catching tight end, you put in the bullet because then that's a defender who is specifically tailored to defend that kind of player, and you don't end up with a Sam like Pete Werner trying to chase a pass catcher 30 yards downfield like you saw at Tom Sauce last year, because that didn't go well. That's not on Pete Werner, that's on the coaching staff from last year. It sounds like they have potentially come up with a way to solve that issue this year.
I still think and these are selfless players, but I just wonder how happy these guys will be to be playing so little, where Pete Werner and Brendan White are splitting, snaps when both were starting last year and playing the majority of snaps, or playing more than they will this year, or Josh Proctor being a nickel player, Shaun Wade being, and we still like the slot corner is a strong safety, but there's only one safety, and Shaun Wade might be listed as a corner in the depth chart. We're still learning about this entire thing, and maybe just trying too hard to understand it. But you've got all of these different guys who can do so many different things. The pressure is on Jeff Hafley and Greg Madison to make those correct calls. Jeff Hafley, they talk about wanting to just plug and play. you better be plugging the right guys in, and you better be calling the right plays.
But they have enough different options there that there's probably not just one single solitary option for a lot of those situations. There may be an optimal option, but you have a couple different choices. And I mean, as far as managing the playing time and managing the expectations of the playing time, 2 years ago, Nick Bosa was playing, 30 snaps a game, something like that. And it never seemed like there was an issue with that because there was comparable talent out there along with him. And so he's playing, and he might not be playing ideally in his head. Most of these guys never want to come off the field, and you can't just stay on the field every single play, every single game. But they all want to play. They all think they should never come off the field. But I would think at some point when you see other guys producing, that makes it like, okay, well, I'm not getting pulled off the field for some guy who can't play. And you also, at the end of those games, you're so much fresher than the opponent that you're able to take advantage of a worn-out opponent who's been going, if the opposing offensive, left tackle has played 60 snaps and you've only played 30, guess what? He's going to be tired. It's going to be easier for you to get around him and make a big play when it matters most.
Well, and that also goes back to the culture, where last year it was either Johnny Dixon or Terry McLaurin had already scored a touchdown in a particular game, and a play was called for him to score again down inside the 5, and he's like, no, Johnny sent Terry in instead so that he could get a touchdown in that game because he already had one. And you talking to other players where they are as happy to see their backup or the guy they rep with having success as they are for when they have their own success. And if you don't have that culture, maybe then you have some issues. But when you've got that culture, you have everybody rooting each other on. And yes, you'd rather be playing, but it's also cool to see good things happening to somebody you've worked so hard with, who may be, your roommate or whomever, somebody you're very close with. Of course, you're going to be happy to see them have success, and it's probably easier to deal with everybody if more people are playing as well. You don't have somebody who is bitter, complaining all the time that they're not getting to play. But as long as you're showing that you can play, no reason not to play.
Right, and if everyone is playing kind of an equal amount, that probably keeps the malcontents at bay in whatever the individual position room is. And it's, we have talked about this being the time of year when everyone's happy and everyone's optimistic and everyone's cheerful, everyone's a good teammate, and we all just support each other. And there are programs where you can tell that's probably not the case, but they all say it. No one ever says, no, I don't want those other jerks to play.
What kind of name a program that you think that would probably be the norm of, and don't say Miami.
Well, Miami would be a good answer. I think if you look at some of the programs where the recruiting rankings have not necessarily matched the on-field results, those are probably programs where you have some behind-the-scenes cultural issues of one form or another. That's probably a good measuring stick for the kind of program where you might think that might happen. My favorite thing, you dear listeners cannot see this, every time they gun the engine of the Gator right next to us, Gerd just shakes his head sadly. It's pretty fantastic. It's been happening for weeks now, and it's still the exact same head shake every time.
And it will probably last until, late November?
We'll end up podcasting out in the frozen tundra of the parking lot with the wind whipping in November just to get away from the Gators. One position where they talked about that tonight was tight end, where it talked about, Kevin Wilson said this is maybe the strongest, deepest tight end unit he's ever had anywhere. And
that includes Indiana.
And that yes, technically, yes, it does. You've got 4 guys there who are returning. The freshman Cormonte Hamilton has been kind of limited with injury, but the 4 guys who are back, Luke Farrell, Rashad Berry, Jake Hausman, Jeremy Ruckert, those 4 guys are all people who are veterans now, have either played or have the credentials to play. Jake Hausman is kind of the forgotten man in that rotation of 4 guys. Kevin Wilson probably talked about him more than anyone else. Just what a great job he's done this year, how ready he is to play, how he probably hasn't played as much as he should.
Yeah.
But when you talk to Jeremy Ruckert says, we just want to the unit to do well. They're not worried about individual people. And, again, that's very easy to say this time of year, but there is more reason to think that it's true on this team based on what we've seen out of that wide receiver unit, based on what we've seen out of that defensive line unit the last few years, than you might assume just on any random college football team.
We've talked about how that second tight end could be just another H in this offense. And saying that Jake Hausman should play more, I could see Hausman and Farrell being the tight ends, and Berry and Ruckert being the guys who could be off the line, flexed out or split out. Because Rashad Berry had a problem with holding last year, kind of held quite a bit. And I don't know that all of those were on, as a tight, tight on the line, or if some of those happened in the slot. I think most of them happened while he was lined up as a tight end. Maybe his best offense is to be split out a little bit and off of that line to use his athleticism. We know he's an incredible athlete. And maybe the better second blocking tight end would be Jake Hausman, who is a strong dude. So, he's a 6'4", 250-ish, 255, who was the highest ranked tight end of his class with him and Luke Farrell, at least ranked higher than Luke Farrell. I think at one point Hausman was the number one tight end in that 2016 recruiting class. So maybe we've got two deep at a receiver that will all play. Maybe there's a two deep at two different types of tight end position as well. And when you have that kind of depth and that kind of talent, you can maybe start to compartmentalize and say these are your specialties. That way we can get you on the field in a way that maybe we couldn't if you were the number 4 tight end. But if you're the number 2, there are more opportunities available to you.
Yeah, that's certainly a possibility. Jeremy Ruckert talked tonight about the fact that they do kind of cross-train them on the tight ends, also know what the H's do. And he said that it's kind of a function of the way Ryan Day runs the offense, where it's not so much plays as it's concepts. So they know all of the concepts that the H's run, just like they know all the concepts that the inline tight ends run. So you can slot him out to the H, and that's fine. Kevin Wilson said, that's great, and it would be great to have Jeremy Ruckert out there, because Jeremy Ruckert's doing a good job with blocking now. But who else does a good job with blocking? KJ Hill. Well, it means you're taking KJ Hill off the field.
And that's the problem.
So that's the issue. It's that that absolutely makes a lot of sense. But in order to put Jeremy Ruckert, who is a 5-star number 1 tight end in the nation a year ago, in order to get him on the field at H, you need to take off the field the guy who is quite possibly going to be the all-time leading Ohio State receptions leader by the end of this year. So, I mean, this is one of these Ohio State football file this under good problems to have kind of things. But this is the perpetual answer to why don't they throw to the tight ends more? Like, well, okay, we also have all of these wide receivers who are 4- and 5-star wide receivers who came in incredibly highly hyped, who are among the best in the country. So every time we give a snap to a tight end, we're taking a wide receiver off the field. Every time we throw a pass to a tight end, we're not throwing it to a wide receiver. So you gotta, these are not bad problems to have, but there's stuff that still has to get sorted out one way or the other.
Yeah, and like Jim Tressel used to say, like, well, if we're throwing to the tight end, that means we're not throwing to Ted Ginn, we're not throwing to Santonio Holmes, we're not throwing to Anthony Gonzalez. And really, why would you do that? You throw to those guys.
How would the 2005 Texas game have turned out had they thrown to Santonio Holmes? Too soon?
We're not going to talk about that, Tom. Yeah, it's still very much too soon. I still have not gotten a response to my death threat. I'm still waiting. Sir, why have you not responded when I threatened your life on email? Is this a live show? Anything else from today? You just said something with the tight ends about knowing the H-backs roles. That's knowing the concepts. That's very similar to the defense, where the linebackers have to know all of the different concepts. The secondary studies together. They're in the same room, so they all know the concepts. And that was something that Damon Arnett said on Tuesday that helps them all play better, is because they all communicate in the classroom, on the field, off the field, and they all speak the same language. And they're able to get things done quicker on the field when, just a wave of a hand or a certain look. I mean, it becomes, when you have so much communication, it almost becomes nonverbal. Mm-hmm. And when you're on the field, a lot of times it has to be nonverbal. And when you know all of these concepts, frontwards and back, both offense and defense, Tom, I'm thinking 16 wins this year.
At least, including the preseason win against the Bengals this weekend. Yeah, that seems reasonable. Yeah, it's a lot of this is the old cliche that you can't win the national championship over the summer, but you can lose it. It sounds like, and it seems like, and it sort of feels like around the program, like they feel like they haven't lost the national championship this summer. They've kind of put themselves in a position where they are one of the teams that can be in that conversation, not just from the fact that they're ranked number 5 off, in the initial polls, but just they have put in the work that you need to put in. They have made the improvements that they need to make. Just take a guy like Jeremy Ruckert. Jeremy Ruckert said he is faster than he was last year. He said his 40 time is in the low 4.7s right now. He said he has gone from being able to do 10 reps of 225 pounds on the bench when he got here to 19 or 20 now. That's a lot of work. That is, it's like, oh, well, he's just doing 10 more. I'm like, well, that's actually a pretty significant amount. That's, if you're running a 4.7 as a 6'5" tight end, and also you're doing 20 reps on 225 on the bench, that is, if you did that at the NFL Combine, you would be a pretty high draft pick. He's only been here a year, right? I mean, this is not a guy who's ready for the NFL draft yet, and he's already done that amount of work. And all the throwing that the quarterbacks do with the wide receivers over the summer, all the stuff you were just talking about in terms of guys working together, repping together, knowing their role, knowing everyone else's role, knowing how it all fits together. This is all the stuff that you have to do to get to where they want to get at the end of the year. And again, this is the time of year when everyone feels good about where they stand, but it does seem, I feel like there is more optimism inside this building right now than there has been in the last couple of years. That the way they're talking about guys like J.K. Dobbins, it just seems like they are expecting very big things this fall. Kevin Wilson talked about the offensive line and the fact that they have this mixture of, they've got some veteran guys, they've got the Brandon Bowens, they've got the Jonah Jacksons, they've got the Thayer Munfords, but they've got these young, talented guys like Wyatt Davis and Josh Myers. They have the young, talented guys at running back. They have the young, talented guys at wide receiver. That's the core of that 2014 team, was the young, talented guys. It wasn't just all fifth-year guys. It was the highly rated recruits who had been in the program for 2-3 years, who are about that. That's when you kind of burst onto the scene. It feels like that's what the expectation is inside this building right now.
My question for you is, do you think they would have felt like this if they hadn't been listening to the podcast since January? Do you think they would realize that, hey guys, we got some talent here, I watch film and but I heard on the radio show, the Buckeye Weekly podcast, that we're pretty good. And so I think you guys are welcome if we pointed that out to you and you had not realized it. What do you owe us? That's not for us to say.
That's
not. We're not like that. But I could put a list together. DM me, and
I'm sure that McFlurry machine back in the press box would be at the top of the list.
That would be at the top of the list.
If only we knew someone in the Ohio State media department who would listen. I don't know.
Right. We know a lot of them, but we don't know any of them who will listen.
Yeah.
That's the sticking point right there. Anything else today, Tom?
I think we're good. So this is 3 shows in 3 days. It's been quite a week for our wonderful audience.
Oh, your tone has changed from yesterday, Tom.
I'm just saying, yesterday was a teachable moment. Today we're
you've learned.
And we would have done a show tomorrow after the student practice, but they're not opening that up to the media. Right. So they will have 20,000 students there, but no media. So I'm sure nothing will get out. So it'll be fine.
You know what, Tom? We'll scroll Twitter, and then after practice, we'll just do the way we used to do it from home. No more. Three's good, right?
I think three's just fine this week.
Three,
and
like
then,
boom, boom, boom.
And then next show is game week show.
Well,
Can you believe it?
Should we talk about what our schedule might be this season, like on the air, without actually discussing it with amongst ourselves? Ideally, we should be able to do one of these Tuesday afternoons.
Assuming we get interviews Tuesday afternoons.
Right. Then we have Wednesday evening availabilities. If you guys want one of those, we can probably do one of those after that, like this. Then, of course, we'll have the post game on Saturday, the instant reaction shows. I don't know, 3 is good. But if you have any ideas, feel free to give us some feedback on anything that you so desire that relates to what we just talked about. Make sure it's in that realm. Just no odd stuff, please. So I think that'll do it. We both have homes to get to. The lights are out here. People got a couple of lacrosse guys trying to practice. And before anything loud happens, let's just call it a night, and we will talk to you guys not tomorrow, but soon.